Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com. Today we're going to make a cinnamon streusel coffee cake, and this is what it looks like. This cake has 3 layers of a rich and moist butter cake. I'm going to alternate that with 3 layers of a cinnamon flavored streusel that's just full of toasted pecans. So the first thing that you will need to do is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And then to make this cake, we are using a 10-inch, 25 centimeter tube pan. And this is what it looks like. Comes in 2 pieces. And then you put that right in there. And then you can butter the inside of your pan, or today I'm just going to use one of these non-stick sprays. Make sure you the center tube, make sure you spray or butter that. We don't want our cake sticking to our pan. And then the first thing we're going to do is make our streusel. So you will need 1.5 cups, which is 150 grams of pecans. Now I'm using like the halves. You could just use, you can buy them usually like this, the halves, or even just like coarsely chopped. You can use either type. And we want to toast them because that will really bring out their full flavor. So put them on a baking sheet, pop them in the oven, 6-8 minutes, just until they start to get a little color and you can start to smell them, and then take them out. I've already toasted them ahead of time, so this is what they look like. And then let them sit and cool down completely. And then, now just a little side note, if you didn't want to use pecans, you can't find them, some people say they can't find them, you could use walnuts. You could use almonds or hazelnuts, or really, you could use like a combination, a couple. You could use the pecans with the walnuts or something like that. Have fun with what you want to do there. Now, what we want to do now is finely chop our pecans. You could do that on a cutting board with a sharp knife. Sometimes I do that. It does take a little while. So if you have a food processor like I do, I'm going to take the shortcut here today, and I'm just going to put my nuts right in here. Now make sure, like I say, that they're cooled down to room temperature. You don't want to be chopping these in your food processor while they're still warm, or you could end up with a paste, which we don't want. So just put that in there, and then I'm just going to pulse. We want to finely chop them, or really you can kind of have them coarsely chopped, whatever your choice, but watch it carefully. We don't want to over-process. Okay, once they're kind of broken up a lot, what I'm going to do is add 1/4 cup, 50 grams of granulated white sugar. If you were doing this on a cutting board, just finely chop and then put those in a bowl along with your sugar. And then 1/4 cup, 55 grams of light brown sugar. And if you're using a measuring cup, you're not weighing your ingredients, which I always say it's better to weigh. But if you don't, then make sure you pat your brown sugar into your measuring cup, because it's very soft. And then, of course, we need some cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. So I'm just going to process this a little more to the nuts get a little more finely chopped, and then everything gets mixed together. And that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is just transfer this, to make it easier, into a little bowl here. I'm going to clean up here, set up, and we'll be right back, and we'll make our cake batter. So now for our cake batter. When you make a coffee cake, it's a butter cake, but it is a rich butter cake. And the richness comes not only from the butter, but sour cream. So you will need 1.5 cups, which is 340 grams of, you want the full fat, sour cream. Have it at room temperature. Now sour cream, is heavier than, say, milk or something like that. So we're going to lighten it, the texture of it. So take your sour cream and then add 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of baking soda. Kind of a little different. Normally you would add the baking soda into your flour, but we're going to add it into, right now, right at the beginning, into our sour cream and stir it in. And what that's going to do is the sour cream activates the baking soda, and it produces carbon dioxide gas, and that's going to lighten the sour cream. So while we're going to have that rich flavor, I find it does lighten the cake batter a little. So just give that a really good stir, and then that's it. So now for our batter, if you have a stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer for this. The first thing that you will need is 1 cup, which is 225 grams. I'm using unsalted butter. Have your butter at room temperature. I like the flavor of unsalted butter, and I also like if I use unsalted, that way I can control the amount of salt in the recipe. But if you have a favorite salted butter that you like, then go ahead and use that, and then just leave out the salt in the recipe. So now what I'm going to do is just beat the butter on medium speed, just to get it nice and smooth. Okay, that looks good. The advantage too of beating your butter like this at the beginning till it's nice and smooth is if you kind of maybe forgot to take your butter out early enough and it's a little cold, if you beat it a little, it'll soften it up. So now what we're going to do is add 1.5 cups, 300 grams of granulated white sugar. I'm going to do that, there's quite a bit of sugar, so I'm going to do this gradually with my mixer on low, kind of low speed. Add a little until it's all added. And then what I'm going to do is increase the speed to high, and I'm going to beat this until it's really combined. And I want to get some air, incorporate some air. So I'm going to beat this until it's very nice and light and fluffy. That, maybe depending on what type of mixer you're using, 3 to 5 minutes. So. Okay. So this is what we're looking for. You can see it's lightened in color, nice and fluffy. So scrape the sides and the bottom of your bowl. Do that periodically to make sure everything gets mixed together. And now we are going to add 3 large eggs, which would be out of the shell, 165 grams. Have your eggs at room temperature. And I'm going to also add 1.5 teaspoons, 6 grams of pure vanilla extract. So what I'm going to do with the eggs is add them one at a time. Add one. I'm going to beat that in on medium speed, and then I'll add the next one and the next one. Okay, so that's our eggs. So in a separate bowl, I have 3 cups, which is 390 grams of all-purpose flour or plain flour. And to that, I'm going to add 2 teaspoons, which is 8 grams of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. Like I said, if you use salted butter, just leave out that salt. And I'm using a whisk. You could just use a fork, or you could even sift your ingredients together. You want to make sure that that salt and that baking powder are really mixed into the flour. So now, as with any butter cake, you have your dry ingredients and your wet ingredients. We're going to add the flour in 3 additions, alternate that with the sour cream in 2. So just put, maybe 1/3, thereabouts. And of course, beat this on low speed. You don't want that flour coming up in your face. And when it's almost mixed in, you don't want to beat your batter too much here. We just want to make sure that everything's mixed together. That's it. So now I'm going to put about 1/2 of our sour cream. Oh, now, I don't know whether you can tell this because it's just a big white blob, but the texture of our sour cream has changed with having the baking soda mixed in for maybe, what, 10 minutes? It's really lightened the texture. So that's going to produce a lighter textured cake. Because typically, you know, like I said, I'm putting half in here. Typically, you know, a coffee cake with all that butter and sour cream, it's really good, but it can be quite dense in texture. So doing this with the sour cream is going to lighten that texture. So I'm just going to beat this in. Again, low speed. Okay. And another bit of our flour. Half of the half. Okay, and now the rest of our sour cream. Now, I know some people are going to ask, could I use like creme fraiche? You could. And actually, when I was testing this recipe, I did use creme fraiche. But I did notice, I don't know whether it's the acidity of creme fraiche, it must be different than sour cream. I did find that the cake baked in a little shorter time, and it wasn't quite as soft. So while it was really good, and really you wouldn't notice, but since I tested the both, there is a little bit of a difference. And like I said, you may have to adjust the baking time just a little, might be a little shorter. So just keep that in mind if you're going to use creme fraiche. Okay, so now I'm going to beat this in. Okay, and our last bit. Now, I know some people will say, why don't you just put everything all in there and just, mix? Well, you could, but then you'd have to probably mix this a long time. And then that develops the gluten in the flour, and then the cake won't be the texture won't be so soft. So that is why we do this. Okay, just beat that in. Okay, so it's done. So now, scrape I have a little flour on the sides. I'm just going to mix that in by hand. As you can see, this was not, it's your typical butter cake batter, not hard to make. I would say the more labor-intensive part comes now, because we are going to layer, let's put this in here, we are going to layer 3 layers of cake, alternate that with 3 layers of the streusel. That's the time-consuming part. So just mix all this in. I love coffee cakes. They are so good. And they look beautiful, especially this one in the tube pan. So now, you will need your streusel. And you will need your cake batter. Now, you're going to have to divide your batter into thirds. As I always go, a scale. It is so much easier. I'm just going to put 470 grams of batter, weigh that out, and that would be a third. So if you haven't bought a scale, they've really come down in price over the years. Probably less than a nice, stainless steel measuring cup. So invest in one. So 470. So now we've got our pan. And what I like to do is, because a tube pan, that 2 pieces, sometimes you may get some leakage. So I like to put my tube pan on a baking sheet. Plus it's easier to lift it up and put it into the oven. So now, just take 2 spoons. I guess you could put it in a piping bag and pipe it, but I'm just going to. And just put dollops all the way around. Okay, and then you could just use the back of a spoon, or I love my offset spatulas, and then I'm just going to smooth that out. Just kind of dab it because it's kind of sticky until you get it going here, and then just get it in an even layer. Okay. Make sure you get it all the way around to the edges. Smooth it out as, as best as you can for an even layer. And then we are going to next sprinkle on some streusel. So for the streusel, you will need, I've already measured my first one out, 85 grams, or I did measure the cups. That's a scant 3/4 of a cup. And I'm just going to use my fingers here. You could use a spoon. Just sprinkle an even layer. It's so, I think what I love about this is when you look at the cake and you have the 3 layers of cake and then the 3 layers of streusel, it is so pretty. And it's an impressive looking cake. Feeds a large crowd, probably, anywhere, depending on how hungry you are, 12 to 16 people. And then I'm just going to take, again, even that out. And then what I like to do, just so it makes it a little easier, when I put the next layer of cake batter, so that I'm going to just press the streusel just gently into that cake. Because if I don't do that, first time I tested, I didn't. What happens when I put the next layer of cake batter, it kind of sticks, and then when I try to even it out, the streusel tends to get all into the batter. And I want those 3 separate layers. That's why I'm just going to press that down ever so gently, or you could do it with your fingers. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is just another layer of cake batter, which is, again, 475 grams, followed by 85 grams of the streusel, and then again. Okay, so I've done my layering, 3 layers of cake, alternate that with, this is my top 3rd layer of the streusel. Normally with the cake batter, I do weigh it. So it was 470 grams for each layer. So what I decided to do, just in case you use cups, is while I was doing this, I measured out. And if you want to use cups, it would be 2 cups for each layer. So 470 grams is about 2 cups. Now I know. So now I got that last layer. Again, I'm going to press that in because if not, as it rises and then when it cools, you don't want your crumbs to fall off, because some would say that's the best part, like me. Although the cake's good too. The combination is nice. So and then that looks good just the way it is. But what I sometimes like to do is just I have some extra toasted pecans, just to kind of, and I just have big pieces, just to decorate. I mean, you don't have to do this. And so while I'm doing this, and make sure you press those in too. Baking. While this bakes, it's going to rise and it's going to turn a beautiful golden brown. You may get a little bit of cracking on the top, so don't panic. That's okay. And when you put a wooden toothpick into the center, like you have this into the center here, it will come out clean. I'm going to say 60 to 65 minutes. Everybody's oven is a little different. Some run a little hot, some run a little cold. Good idea to get a freestanding oven thermometer so you can really check the accuracy of your oven. But what I like to do with this, say the recipe says 60 minutes. I like to check it at 55, because if your oven's running a little hot and you don't know that, it could be done and then, it might be a little dry. So check it about 55. And, if there's still batter clinging, do it a little longer. So 60 to 65, I do like to rotate my pan front to back, halfway through, because sometimes you have hot spots in your oven, so that will even out that you know, the bake. So 60, 65. Okay, so our coffee cake is done. Doesn't that look gorgeous? I just love the look of it. As you can see, it's risen quite a bit. Beautiful golden brown. And if you put a wooden toothpick into the center here, it came out clean. So put your baking sheet on a wire rack. We're going to let this cool, just like this, for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then when we come back, we will take off the sides of the pan. So I let the coffee cake cool for about 25 minutes so we can remove the sides. So just take either, like I got an offset spatula, you could use a knife, and just run it around the inside just to make sure it's not sticking. And then what I do, because it's cooled down, I'm just going to grab that inner tube. You might, if it's still warm, you could use a cloth or your oven mitt, but mine isn't. So just lift it out like so and put it on your wire rack. It's still a little warm. I'm going to let it cool down completely before I show you how to remove that inner tube. So that'll be maybe half an hour, and then we'll be back. So I let the cake cool completely, probably about 2 hours. That way it cools to room temperature, plus it firms up. Now, unfortunately today, I really couldn't show you how I got the cake off of that, because it's a two-person job and Rick's manning the camera, so there's only me. But I will tell you how to do it. What you first need to do is to take your spatula and put it underneath between the cake and the rim here, and just run it all the way around. Plus, take a knife or a spatula and loosen it around here. And then what you really, it's simple to do. You have one person that has to hold this down just like that, and then the other person just lifts the cake right up and off. But since I don't have anybody to hold that down, I had to do it with Rick off camera. So this is what it looks like. Now, short of that, if you don't have anybody, then really what the other choice is, you could cut a slice and then it just, you know, you just take it off that way. I don't like, you know, you could say, well, why don't you put a plate on top and flip it upside down, and then you could do it that way. But unfortunately, I find the crumbs all fall off, which I don't want to lose any crumbs. So that's the only little tricky part doing this cake. But so we finished. I think it's gorgeous. I love the round shape. I love the crumbs on top. And I like how I put the some extra larger pecans on the top. I think it just makes it look more decorative. It's a large cake. Like I said, anywhere from 12 to 16 people because it's very rich. Now, if you say I don't need a cake this big, you know, you can go to the joyofbaking.com, our website, or our YouTube channel. I do have a coffee cake recipe that's almost the same as this, that's like half the size, and you bake it in just I think it's a 9-inch cake pan. So that, I mean, that's a choice. But this is so gorgeous, and you can freeze the cake. So I just love making this one. Now I'm just gonna cut. Okay, I'm not going to eat all this, but I'm going to cut a fairly large chunk out of here so I can turn the cake so you can see inside, or you can see it here. Isn't that gorgeous? I just love, you know, normally like I was saying, the other cake, coffee cake recipe I have on the site, it's a round. It only has one, I'll call it a vein of streusel in the center and then on top. But with this one, because we're making it large and in a tube pan, I could do the 3 layers with the 2 layers, 2 veins of cinnamon streusel. I just think it looks gorgeous. Very like, okay, professional looking, like what you would see in a bakery. But So I'll stop talking and I'll just try a little. That combination of vanilla, butter cake, and streusel, I just love it. Very moist. And you know, I think when we added that baking soda to the sour cream, where it lightened the sour cream, it just lightens the whole texture. Where it doesn't, like typically coffee cakes can be usually a little more dense, which is fine. I like that too. But this one, I think it lightened the texture, and it's just wonderful. It's so moist with that sour cream and butter. It's just a wonderful cake. And then, of course, the crumb coating or the streusel, it just tops the cake off. So you can store this quite a few days at room temperature. You could freeze it, but you know. But if you have somewhere to go or a large crowd, this is the cake for you. So you must make it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.